Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Ivan Jue, and I teach international business at Cerritos College. Today's lecture focuses on two major concepts in international business: the International Monetary System, IMS, and the balance of payments, or BOP. These concepts are critical because every international business transaction involves foreign currencies, international payments, and cross-border financial flows. So with that, let's begin. So the International Monetary System, or IMS, is important because international businesses constantly deal with different currencies, foreign investments, international payments. A stable monetary system helps reduce currency risk, encourage trade, and increase investor confidence. The balance of payments, or BOP, tracks exports and imports of goods and services, investment income, transfers or gifts, foreign investments, stock purchases, and government holdings of foreign currencies and gold. So the International Monetary System is the global framework that determines how countries value their currencies, how exchange rates are set, and how currencies are exchanged between nations. In simple terms, it is the rule book of how money moves between countries. For example, when a US company buys products from Japan, it must exchange US dollars for Japanese yen. The IMS helps determine how much yen the dollar can buy, whether exchange rates float freely or are controlled, and how governments manage their currencies. The IMS affects international trade, foreign investment, inflation, interest rates, and global economic stability. The balance of payments, or BOP, records all economic transactions between one country and the rest of the world. It tracks exports and imports, foreign investments, loans, tourism spending, and money transfers. Think of it as a country's financial report card with the world. So, as an example, if the United States exports airplanes to Europe, money flows into the US. Imports oil from Saudi Arabia, money flows out of the US. Both transactions are recorded in the BOP. So why is the BOP important? The BOP helps economists and governments understand whether a country is earning more than it spends internationally. It also measures the strength of its economy and whether its currency may rise or fall and potential economic problems. A healthy BOP may indicate strong exports, stable foreign investment, and economic growth. A weak BOP may signal trade deficits, excessive debt, or currency pressure. Okay, so now we will talk about the gold standard, one of the earliest international monetary systems used to manage currencies and global trade. So what was the gold standard? Under the gold standard, countries agreed that their paper money could be exchanged for a fixed amount of gold. So in this case, a country might promise that 1 British pound equals a certain amount of gold, 1 US dollar equals another fixed amount of gold. People and governments could exchange paper currency for actual gold. The United Kingdom adopted this concept first in 1821. This was very important because Britain was the world's largest trading power at the time. Other countries followed Britain's system to make international trade easier and more stable. The gold standard created a fixed exchange rate system. That means currency values stayed relatively stable and predictable. Exchange rates between countries did not fluctuate much. What is the sterling-based gold standard, and why is there such an emphasis on British pounds? Well, this is because Britain dominated global trade and finance during the 1800s. The British pound, called the sterling, became the most trusted currency, widely accepted around the world, almost like the global currency of that era. So businesses often used gold or British pounds to pay for international trade. So, what are the advantages of the gold standard? Well, this system helped to stabilize exchange rates, reduce uncertainty in trade, increase trust in currencies, and support international commerce. Unfortunately, there were also problems with the gold standard. Countries could not easily print more money during recessions, economies depended heavily on gold supply, and governments had less flexibility to fight unemployment or crises. These issues became severe during wars and economic depressions. So, why did the gold standard eventually fail and collapse during the early 20th century? So, five major world events weakened the system until countries abandoned it completely. Number one, World War One. During World War One, from 1914 to 1918, governments needed huge amounts of money to pay for war, and many countries printed more paper money, so they stopped exchanging currency for gold. The problem from this is that countries no longer had enough gold to back all the money they printed. As a result, confidence in the gold standard weakened and the fixed exchange rate system became unstable. Number two, the Great Depression. The Great Depression began in 1929 and caused massive unemployment, falling production, bank failures, and severe global economic decline. Under the gold standard, countries could not easily increase the money supply because every currency had to remain backed by gold. So as a result, governments had very little ability to stimulate their economies. Many economists believe the gold standard actually made the depression worse because it restricted economic flexibility. Number three, competitive devaluations. As economies struggled, countries began lowering the value of their currencies intentionally. This is called a competitive devaluation. Why? A cheaper currency makes exports less expensive and imports more expensive. Countries hoped this would increase exports, create jobs, and help their economies recover. So, as an example, if Japan lowers the value of the yen, Japanese products become cheaper for foreign buyers, helping Japanese exporters compete internationally. But if many countries do this at the same time, it creates instability in global trade. Number four, beggar thy neighbor policies. These were selfish economic policies where countries tried to improve their own economy at the expense of others. Examples include tariffs, import restrictions, currency devaluations, and trade barriers. But why was this called beggar thy neighbor? Well, that's because one country's gain often hurt another country's economy. These policies reduced global trade, increased international tensions, and deepened the depression worldwide. And then number five, World War II. World War II completely disrupted international trade and finance. By this time, the gold standard had largely collapsed. Economies were unstable, and countries needed a new international monetary system. After World War II, nations created the Bretton Woods system, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, and completely changed the modern floating exchange rate system. The Bretton Woods era was a major turning point in the history of the international monetary system after World War II. So why did Bretton Woods happen? Before Bretton Woods, the world experienced the Great Depression, unstable currencies, trade wars, competitive devaluations, and World War II. Countries realized they needed a better global financial system to prevent future economic collapse. They also needed to stabilize currencies, encourage trade, and rebuild economies after the war. The Bretton Woods Conference, which happened in 1944, had representatives from 44 countries that met in Bretton Woods. Their goal was to create a stable post-war international monetary system. These representatives agreed to several things: renew the gold standard, or the modified version. In this case, the conference restored the gold standard, but in a different form. Previously, every country directly tied its currency to gold. Under the modified Bretton Woods system, most countries tied their currencies to the US dollar, and the US dollar was tied to gold. The US promised $35 would equal 1 ounce of gold. So the dollar became the center of the world monetary system. This created stable exchange rates, predictable international trade, confidence in global currencies. Businesses prefer stability because exchange rate uncertainty creates financial risk. The conference also created two powerful global institutions. Number one, World Bank. Officially called World Bank Group, it was originally called International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, or IBRD. The purpose of the World Bank was to rebuild Europe after World War II. Later, it helped developing countries improve infrastructure, education, healthcare, and economic development. Second, it created the International Monetary Fund. The IMF was designed to stabilize currencies, prevent financial crises, assist countries with balance of payments problems, and encourage international trade. So if a country runs out of foreign currency reserves and cannot pay international debts, the IMF can provide the emergency loans. In exchange, the country often must reform its economy. So technically, the World Bank's formal name is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD. Most people today simply call it the World Bank. The World Bank was created after World War II. Europe was heavily damaged, cities destroyed, factories ruined, transportation systems collapsed. The World Bank's first mission was to provide loans to rebuild war-torn European economies. After Europe recovered, the World Bank changed its focus and began helping poorer and developing countries grow economically. Its goal became reducing poverty, improving living standards, and supporting economic development. The World Bank provides loans, financial assistance, technical expertise, and development programs. The World Bank may fund highways, schools, hospitals, clean water systems, energy projects, internet infrastructure. The idea is stronger infrastructure, which would mean stronger economy and then improved quality of life. There's 4 affiliated organizations to the World Bank. Number 1, International Development Association, or IDA. The purpose here is to help the poorest countries. It helps to provide low interest or very flexible loans. These are often called soft loans. Number 2, International Finance Corporation, or IFC. The purpose here is to support private businesses in developing countries. Instead of lending to governments, the IFC helps companies, entrepreneurs, and private sector projects. As an example, helping finance factories or technology companies. Number 3, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, or MIGA, MIGA. The purpose here is to encourage foreign investment. Many investors fear political instability, war, government seizure of assets. MIGA reduces these risks by offering political risk insurance. Number 4, International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, or ICSID. The purpose here is to resolve disputes between foreign investors and governments. It acts like an international arbitration court. The World Bank is not just one organization, however. it is actually a group of several institutions with different roles. At the top is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. This is the main part of the World Bank, often simply called again the World Bank. The IBRD makes hard loans. So hard loans are regular loans with interest, stricter repayment requirements, usually given to middle income development countries. These countries are poor enough to need help but financially stable enough to repay the loans. $22.6 billion in new loans were made in 2017. 4 major organizations were connected by the World Bank Group. Each has a specialized role. Number 1, International Development Association, again IDA. The IDA helps the world's poorest countries. It provides the soft loans. Soft loans have very low interest rates, long repayment periods, flexible repayment conditions. Sometimes repayment is partially forgiven. So why is this important? Many very poor countries cannot afford normal commercial loans. The IDA helps them fund schools, healthcare, sanitation, and poverty reduction programs. $19.5 billion in soft loans were given in 2017. Number 2, the International Finance Corporation, or IFC. The IFC supports private businesses, entrepreneurship, and private sector growth. Instead of lending to governments, the IFC helps companies directly. The IFC may finance manufacturing companies, technology startups, renewable energy firms, and telecommunication projects. $11.8 billion in IFC loans and equity were made in 2017. Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, or MIGA. MIGA encourages foreign investment by reducing political risk. Political risks include war, government takeover, political instability, and currency restrictions. If a company builds a factory in a risky country, MIGA may provide insurance protection. $4.8 billion were given in MIGA insurance in 2017. And number 4, International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, or ICSID. ICSID helps handle legal disputes between foreign investors and governments. It provides arbitration services. If a government unfairly seizes foreign-owned assets, ICSID may help resolve the dispute legally. So the International Monetary Fund was created after World War II during the Bretton Woods Conference. Its overall goal is to maintain stability in the international finance system. There are 6 key points. Number 1 is to boost international monetary cooperation. This means that countries work together on financial and currency issues. The IMF acts like a global financial meeting place. Countries cooperate on exchange rates, inflation problems, economic crises, and international lending. Without cooperation, countries may compete unfairly, manipulate currencies, or create financial instability. The IMF helps countries coordinate policies. Number 2, facilitate international trade. The IMF supports smooth global trade between countries. Trade works best when currencies are stable, exchange systems are predictable, countries trust each other financially. If exchange rates constantly crash, businesses become afraid to trade internationally. The IMF helps to reduce this uncertainty. Number 3, stabilize exchange arrangements. This refers to keeping currency exchange systems stable. Unstable currencies can cause inflation, financial panic, trade disruptions, investment losses. The IMF helps countries maintain orderly exchange rates, avoid sudden currency collapses. If a country's currency suddenly loses value, imports become expensive, inflation rises, investors may flee. The IMF may step in with loans, policy advice, or financial support. Number 4, foster a multilateral payment system. This means creating a system where countries can make international payments easily. Multilateral means many countries interacting together. International trade requires cross-border payments, currency exchanges, banking cooperation. The IMF helps ensure countries can pay one another smoothly. Number 5, build confidence of members. The IMF helps countries feel financially secure. Countries know if they face economic trouble, the IMF may provide emergency assistance. This increases investor confidence, financial stability, global trust. If investors believe the IMF will support a struggling country, panic and capital flight may decrease. And number 6, adjust international balance of payments. This refers to helping countries solve balance of payments problems. It happens when a country spends more foreign currency than it earns. As an example, importing too much, exporting too little, owing too much foreign debt, eventually the country may run out of foreign currency reserves. The IMF may provide emergency loans, financial assistance, economic reform programs, and in return, the IMF often requires economic policy changes, spending cuts, tax reforms, or inflation controls. This is called IMF conditionality. So as of 2018, 189 countries were members. Virtually every country in the world belongs to the IMF. Countries join because the IMF helps stabilize economies, provide emergency loans, and support global trade and finance. To join the IMF, a country must contribute money called a quota. Think of the quota as a membership contribution or financial share in the IMF. A country's quota is mainly based on the size of its economy, GDP, trade volume, and financial importance in the world economy. Larger economies usually pay larger quotas. The United States, China, and Japan have very large quotas because their economies are large. Smaller countries pay smaller quotas. The more quota a country contributes, the more voting power it has inside the IMF. The IMF makes important decisions about loans, financial rescue packages, policy changes, and international monetary issues. Countries with larger voting power have more influence over these decisions. The United States has one of the largest IMF quotas, so it also has the strongest voting influence. A country's quota also affects how much money it can borrow from the IMF. Generally, larger quotas means for larger borrowing capacity. Countries borrow when they face financial crises, currency collapses, debt problems, and shortage of foreign currency reserves. So what is IMF conditionality? When the IMF gives loans, it usually requires countries to follow certain economic conditions or reforms. These requirements are called IMF conditionality. The IMF may require a country to reduce government spending, raise taxes, fight inflation, reduce budget deficits, reform banking systems, and stabilize its currency. The IMF wants to make sure countries fix the underlying economic problems and can eventually repay the loans. However, there is criticism of IMF conditionality. Some people argue IMF conditions are too strict, hurt economic growth, increase unemployment, or create hardship for citizens. Others believe the reforms are necessary for long-term stability. Under Bretton Woods, the U.S. promised to exchange dollars for gold at a fixed price. 35 U.S. dollars equals 1 ounce of gold. Other countries link their currencies to the U.S. dollar instead of directly to gold. So suppose Japan fixed the yen to the dollar, France fixed the franc to the dollar. Because all currencies connected to the dollar, their exchange rates became stable relative to one another. So why did the dollar become the center? After World War II, the US had the strongest economy, huge gold reserves, and major global political power. So the dollar became the world's primary reserve currency. A fixed exchange rate means currency values remain stable, governments maintain a specific exchange rate, countries agreed to keep their currencies within a very small range around the official value. Stable exchange rates help international trade, investment, and business planning. Businesses prefer predictability. If a company in Germany sells products to the United States, it wants exchange rates to remain stable so profits don't suddenly disappear because of currency fluctuations. So how did governments maintain fixed rates? Central banks intervened by buying currencies, selling currencies, using reserves. This helped keep exchange rates stable. What is the adjustable peg system? The system was fixed, but not permanently fixed. That is why it's called an adjustable peg system. So what does a peg mean? It is a currency that is tied to another currency or gold. Under Bretton Woods, currencies were pegged to the US dollar. What does adjustable mean? Countries could change their exchange rates if serious economic problems occurred. This adjustment is called a devaluation or reevaluation. If a country's exports became too expensive, it might lower the value of its currency to become more competitive internationally. Purely fixed systems can become too rigid, difficult to maintain during economic crises. The adjustable peg system allowed some flexibility while still maintaining overall stability. Why did the Bretton Woods system collapse in the early 1970s? So even though Bretton Woods created stability after World War II, 5 major economic problems eventually caused the system to fail. Number 1, speculative runs on the bank. This refers to investors suddenly losing confidence in a currency. Under Bretton Woods, countries promised to maintain fixed exchange rates. If investors believed a country could no longer maintain its currency value, they rushed to sell that currency and convert it into stronger currencies or gold. This is similar to a traditional bank run. Why was this so dangerous? Fixed exchange rate systems depend on confidence. Once confidence disappears, panic spreads quickly. Central banks may run out of reserves and the system becomes unstable. Number 2, Griffin paradox. This is one of the most important reasons Bretton Woods failed. This was named after economist Robert Griffin. The world needed increasing amounts of US dollars to support global trade, but the US promised every dollar could be converted into gold. The more dollars the US printed, the more world trade could grow, but the more dollars foreigners held, the less confidence they had that the US actually had enough gold to redeem them. So the system required more dollars for global growth, but too many dollars weakened trust in the dollar. That contradiction is the Griffin paradox. Number 3, special drawing rights, or SDRs. To help solve the dollar shortage problem, the IMF created SDRs. SDRs are international reserve assets created by the IMF. They are not physical money. Countries can use SDRs to settle international payments or exchange them for major currencies. The goal was to reduce dependence on the US dollar and add liquidity to the global system. However, SDRs were not enough to save Bretton Woods. Number 4, Nixon's 1971 speech was the major turning point. In 1971, Richard Nixon announced the U.S. would stop converting dollars into gold. So why did Nixon do this? The U.S. simply no longer had enough gold reserves to support all the dollars held worldwide. Too many countries wanted gold in exchange for dollars. The U.S. could not maintain the promise. So the decision effectively ended the dollar to gold system and destroyed Bretton Woods. The event is often called the Nixon shock. And number 5, the Smithsonian Conference. After Nixon's announcement, countries tried to save the fixed exchange rate system. At the Smithsonian Conference, countries agreed to adjust exchange rates and create a revised fixed rate system. Did this work? Not for long. Market forces were too strong. By 1973, most major currencies began floating freely. This led to today's flexible exchange rate system. So after Bretton Woods collapsed, many countries adopted a flexible or floating exchange rate system. A floating exchange rate means currency values are determined by supply and demand in the foreign exchange market. Governments no longer guarantee a fixed currency value. Exchange rates can change because of trade flows, inflation, interest rates, political stability, economic growth, and investor confidence. The main advantage of floating rates is that they automatically adjust to market conditions. The main disadvantage is that exchange rates can become volatile, unpredictable, and risky for businesses. Even though exchange rates float, governments and central banks still sometimes intervene. This creates a managed float, or informally, a dirty float. How do governments intervene? Central banks may buy their own currency, sell foreign reserves, influence interest rates. But why would governments intervene? Governments may want to prevent currency crashes, reduce inflation, help exports, and stabilize financial markets. At the Jamaica Agreement, countries officially accepted the end of Bretton Woods. The flexible exchange rates became legal. The agreement officially legitimized floating exchange rates. Countries were allowed to choose whatever exchange system worked best for them. So 4 different exchange systems were allowed. Number 1, the pegged exchange rate. Some countries still preferred fixed exchange rates. They pegged the currency to the US dollar, euro, or another stable currency. Number 2, crawling pegs. A crawling peg means the exchange rate changes gradually over time. Instead of sudden devaluations, the government slowly adjusts the currency. But why use crawling pegs? This helps to avoid shocks, reduce market panic, and improve export competitiveness gradually. Number 3, European Monetary System, or EMS. European countries wanted more stable exchange rates among themselves. They created the European Monetary System. The EMS aimed to reduce currency fluctuations within Europe, encourage trade and economic integration. This system later helped lead to the creation of the euro currency. The current system is an amalgam, or mixture of fixed and flexible exchange rates. As an example, today the US dollar is mostly floating, China yuan is a managed float, and some Middle Eastern currencies are pegged to the US dollar. So after Bretton Woods ended in the 1970s, currencies began floating, exchange rates became more volatile, and countries worried about unstable currency values. By the 1980s, the US dollar became extremely strong. This created major trade problems and led to 2 agreements. Number 1, the Plaza Accord in 1985. The agreement was signed at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. The major economies involved were the United States, Japan, Germany, France, United Kingdom. These were called the Group of Five, G5. Why was the Plaza Accord needed? At the time, the US dollar was too strong. There were problems caused by a strong dollar. A strong dollar made US exports expensive, foreign imports cheaper. As a result, US companies struggled to compete internationally, and the trade deficits increased. The countries agreed to work together to weaken the US dollar. They coordinated actions such as selling dollars in currency markets. As a result, the US dollar declined in value. This helped the US exports to become much more competitive and reduce trade imbalances. The Louvre Accord in 1987. This was named after the Louvre Museum in Paris. Why was the Louvre Accord needed? After the Plaza Accord, the dollar weakened significantly. Countries became worried that the dollar might fall too much. Exchange rate instability could harm global trade. The participating countries agreed to stabilize exchange rates, stop excessive currency fluctuations. So, in other words, the Plaza Accord, the goal of that was to weaken the dollar. The Louvre Accord was to prevent the dollar from falling too far. So the rising oil prices in the 1970s contributed to the international debt crisis. The rapidly rising oil prices happened during 1973 to 1974, and then again in 1978 to 1979. These events caused major global economic problems. During the 1970s, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, reduced oil production and imposed oil embargoes. So as a result, oil prices increased dramatically. During the first oil shock, 1973 to 1974, oil prices rose sharply from about $3 per barrel to around $12 per barrel. This was roughly a 4 times increase. The second oil shock was from 1970 to 1979. Oil prices increased again from around $13 to over $30 per barrel. This created another wave of economic stress worldwide. So why were rising oil prices a big problem? Oil is essential for transportation, manufacturing, electricity, shipping, and industrial production. When oil prices rise, businesses face higher costs. Consumers pay more. Inflation increases. The impact on oil importing countries would be that countries that depended heavily on imported oil faced large increases in expenses, trade deficits, economic slowdowns. Many developing countries especially struggled. So what did countries do? To keep their economies running, many countries borrowed large amounts of money from international banks. So where did the banks get the money? Oil exporting countries suddenly earned huge profits from high oil prices. These profits were called petrodollars. The oil exporting countries deposited this money into international banks. Banks then lent the money to developing countries. This process is called recycling petrodollars. So many countries borrowed more than they could realistically repay. At first, loans seemed manageable, but then oil prices rose again, inflation increased, interest rates increased sharply. Many loans had floating interest rates, so that meant interest payments increased automatically when global interest rates rose. As a result, debt payments exploded. Countries became trapped in heavy debt, weak economies, and rising interest costs. So this was the beginning of the debt crisis. By the early 1980s, many countries could no longer repay loans. As an example, Mexico announced in 1982 that it could not meet debt obligations. This officially triggered the international debt crisis. Why was this so dangerous globally? Banks around the world had lent huge amounts of money. If many countries defaulted, international banks could collapse. Global financial panic could occur. This threatened the international financial system. The International Monetary Fund stepped in by providing emergency loans, restructuring debt, and requiring economic reforms. So the international debt crisis happened in the 1980s. Many developing countries borrowed huge amounts of money during the 1970s, especially after oil prices surged. Eventually, they could not repay their debts. The main causes of this crisis are soaring oil prices, rising interest rates, excessive borrowing, weak economies. Countries became trapped in large debt payments, inflation, and economic recession. So the Baker Plan was developed, and this was named after James Baker. The goal of the Baker Plan was to solve the debt crisis by restructuring loans, encouraging economic reforms, and continuing bank lending. The idea was economic growth would help countries eventually repay debts. The problem with the Baker Plan was that many countries still struggled. Debt remained too large, and economies remained weak. The crisis continued. So the Brady Plan was developed, and this was named after Nicholas Brady. Unlike the Baker Plan, the Brady Plan recognized that some debts could never be fully repaid. So the solution included reducing actual debt amounts, forgiving part of the loans, allowing countries to buy back debt at discounts. The Brady Plan was more successful because it reduced debt burdens directly, restored investor confidence, and stabilized many economies. Okay, so the Asian currency crisis began in 1997. It started in Thailand when its currency, the baht, collapsed. Many Asian countries had borrowed heavily, dependent on foreign investment, and maintained weak financial systems. When investors lost confidence, money rapidly flowed out, currencies crashed, and stock markets collapsed. The crisis spread to South Korea, Indonesia, Malaysia, and others. The International Monetary Fund provided emergency loans, financial rescue packages, and economic reform programs. The subprime meltdown refers to the global financial crisis of 2007 to 2008. It began in the United States housing market. Subprime loans are the risky loans made to borrowers with poor credit. Banks gave mortgages to many risky borrowers during the housing boom. Housing prices eventually fell. Many borrowers could not repay mortgages. As mortgage defaults increased, banks suffered massive losses. Financial institutions failed. Global markets panicked. So why did it become global? Modern financial markets are highly interconnected. Banks worldwide owned U.S. mortgage-related investments, so the crisis quickly spread internationally. This crisis caused recession, unemployment, stock market crashes, banking failures, and government bailouts. The balance of payments, or BOP accounting system, is one of the most important tools used in international economics because it tracks all economic transactions between a country and the rest of the world. You can think of it as a country's international financial report card. The BOP uses a double entry bookkeeping system. This means every international transaction is recorded twice. Just like accounting, one side is a debit and the other side is a credit. The BOP measures how money flows into and out of a country. It tracks trade, investments, loans, foreign aid, and currency movements. Governments, businesses, and investors use BOP data to evaluate economic strength, financial stability, and future risks. The BOP records transactions between residents of one country and residents of all other countries. So what counts as a transaction? Examples include exports and imports, tourism spending, foreign investments, interest payments, international loans, gifts, and foreign aid. So if a tourist from France spends money in the United States, the transaction becomes part of the US BOP. There's 4 reasons for the importance of BOP statistics. Number 1, it identifies emerging markets. Strong BOP data may indicate growing economies, rising consumer demand, and expanding business opportunities. If a country's exports and investment inflows are rapidly increasing, businesses may see it as an attractive new market. Number 2, warn about policy changes. Weak BOP conditions may force governments to raise taxes, restrict imports, devalue currencies, impose capital controls. BOP data can therefore signal future economic policy changes. If a country is losing too much foreign currency, the government may limit imports or control exchange rates. Number 3, indicate declining foreign exchange reserves. Foreign exchange reserves are currencies held by governments or central banks. If reserves fall sharply, it may signal financial stress. Why is this dangerous? So low reserves may mean the country cannot defend its currency, imports become harder to pay, and financial panic may occur. Number 4, signal lending risk. Banks and investors use BOP data to judge whether lending to a country is safe. If a country consistently imports more than it exports, borrows heavily, or loses reserves, it may struggle to repay debts. Before many financial crises, countries showed warning signs in their BOP data. Investors use BOP statistics to assess default risk, currency risk, and financial stability. Think of the BOP like a country's international accounting statement. The BOP tracks money flowing into the country and money flowing out of the country. There are 4 major parts of the balance of payments or BOP system. Number 1, the current account. This records the flow of goods, services, income, and transfers. What is included? Goods, services, investment income, and transfers. Why is the current account important? It helps to measure trade competitiveness, economic strength, and whether a country imports more than it exports. Number 2, the capital account. This records international financial investments and asset transactions. What is included? The foreign direct investment or FDI, long-term investments involving control, foreign portfolio investment or FPI, passive investments, examples like stocks, bonds, and bank deposits. So why is the capital account important? It shows how attractive a country is to investors, capital flowing in and out, and international investment activity. Number 3, the official reserves account. This tracks reserve assets held by a government or a central bank. What are official reserves? They include gold, foreign currencies, IMF reserve assets, and special drawing rights. Why are reserves important? Governments use reserves to stabilize currencies, pay international obligations, intervene in exchange markets. If a currency weakens too much, the central bank may use reserves to buy its own currency. Number 4, errors and omissions. This is the balancing category. Why is it needed? In real life, transactions are not measured perfectly. Some data is missing. Reporting errors occur. The errors and omissions account adjusts the BOP so the accounts mathematically balance. Example causes of errors are delayed reporting, illegal money transfers, smuggling, inaccurate statistics, and hidden capital flows. So why must the BOP balance? Because the BOP uses double entry bookkeeping. The overall equation is the current account plus capital account and official reserves plus errors and omissions should equal 0. every international transaction creates both an inflow and an outflow somewhere in the system. The current account records the international flow of goods, services, investment income, and transfers. Think of it as tracking a country's day-to-day international economic activity. There are four main components. Number one, exports and imports of goods or merchandise. This refers to physical products traded between countries. Examples of goods are exports like cars, oil, electronics, clothing, machinery. Imports, which are products purchased from foreign countries. So if the United States sells airplanes to Japan, that is a U.S. export and part of the current account. Debit versus credit. The table at the bottom explains accounting treatment. So for goods, buying imports would equal a debit and selling exports would equal a credit. Imports send money out of the country and exports bring money into the country. Number two, exports and imports of services. Services are non-physical economic activities. Examples of services are tourism, consulting, transportation, banking, streaming services, and software subscriptions. If tourists from France spend money in the United States, the U.S. is exporting tourism services. So buying foreign services would equal a debit, and selling services to foreigners would equal a credit. Number three, investment income. This refers to dividends, interest, profits earned from foreign investments. So if a U.S. investor owns stock in Germany and receives dividends, that income enters the U.S. current account as a credit. Paying interest and dividends to foreigners, that equals a debit. So receiving income from foreign investments would equal credit. Number four, gifts, the unilateral transfers. These are transfers where no product or service is exchanged in return. The word unilateral, which means one-sided. Examples are foreign aid, remittances, donations, and gifts to family overseas. So if someone is working in the United States, sends money to family in Mexico, that is a unilateral transfer. Giving gifts, transfers would equal debit. Receiving gifts and transfers would equal credit. The current account balance is the total result after adding exports, imports, services, investment income, and transfers. If credits is greater than debits, the current account has a surplus. If debits is greater than credits, that means a current account deficit. A country that imports more than it exports likely runs a current account deficit. The capital account records international investment flows, purchases and sales of financial assets, and ownership transfers between countries. So in simple terms, it tracks how money moves internationally for investment purposes. There's two main types of investments: the foreign direct investment, or FDI, and the foreign portfolio investment, or FPI. So number one, the foreign direct investment, or FDI. What is FDI? FDI occurs when a company or investor invests in another country with the goal of controlling or managing the business. Usually, ownership of at least 10% voting stock is considered FDI. FDI is long-term and control-oriented. The investor wants influence, management control, or operational involvement. Examples of FDI are foreign subsidiaries, foreign factories, and international joint ventures. So if Toyota builds a factory in the United States, that is the foreign direct investment because Toyota actively controls the operation. FDI often brings jobs, technology, infrastructure, and economic growth. Countries usually like attracting FDI. Number two, Foreign portfolio investment, or FPI. What is FPI? FPI means investing in foreign financial assets without controlling the company. The goal is mainly earning investment returns. Examples would be stocks, bonds, bank deposits, and treasury securities. The short-term foreign portfolio investments. These would have a maturity of 1 year or less. So an example of this would be checking account balances, time deposits, commercial paper, and short-term bank loans. The purpose of these investments is for temporary cash management, international commerce, and short-term returns. The long-term foreign portfolio investments have maturities greater than 1 year. Examples would be government bonds, corporate stocks, and corporate bonds. The purpose would be investors mainly seek dividends, interest, income, long-term capital appreciation. The capital account helps economists understand where investment money is flowing, investor confidence, economic attractiveness, and financial stability. If foreign investors are heavily buying U.S. assets, that usually signals confidence in the U.S. economy. If money rapidly leaves the country, it may signal financial panic or instability. Remember that countries with current account deficits often finance them using capital inflows. If a country imports more than it exports, it may borrow money or attract investments from foreigners. That capital enters through the capital account. The official reserves account tracks the reserve assets owned by a country's government, treasury, or central bank. Think of official reserves as a country's emergency financial savings account for international transactions. Governments use official reserves to stabilize their currency, pay international debts, support imports, and intervene in foreign exchange markets. If a country's currency suddenly weakens, the central bank may use reserves to buy its own currency, which helps increase demand and stabilize the exchange rate. There are 4 types of official reserve assets. Number 1, gold. Historically, gold was the foundation of international monetary systems. Even today, many central banks still hold physical gold reserves. Why hold gold? Gold is viewed as valuable, stable, internationally trusted. It can help support confidence in a country's financial system. Countries like United States and Germany hold very large gold reserves. Number 2, convertible currencies. These are foreign currencies that can easily be exchanged internationally. Examples of convertible currencies: US dollar, the euro, Japanese yen, British pound. These currencies are widely accepted in global markets. Countries need foreign currencies to pay for imports, repay foreign debt, and stabilize exchange rates. If Japan wanted to buy oil internationally, it often pays using US dollars, so Japan needs dollar reserves. Special drawing rights, number 3. SDRs are international reserve assets created by the International Monetary Fund. So what are SDRs? SDRs are not physical money. They are accounting reserve assets that countries can exchange for major currencies. The purpose of SDRs are they help increase global liquidity, support international payments, reduce pressure on reserve currencies like the US dollar. A country facing a shortage of dollars may exchange SDRs for usable currencies. And number 4, reserve positions at the IMF. This refers to a country's ability to assess IMF financial resources. Countries contribute quotas to the IMF. Part of these quotas can later be withdrawn or borrowed if needed. So why is this important? Well, it gives countries emergency financial support during crises. If a country faces a balance of payments crisis, currencies collapse, or shortage of reserves, it may assess IMF reserve resources. Large reserves usually indicate financial strength, stability, and ability to handle crises. Low reserves may signal economic weakness, currency risk, or possible financial instability. If a country runs out of reserves, it may struggle to buy imports, defend its currency, or repay foreign debts. This can lead to devaluation, inflation, or financial crisis. Because the balance of payments uses double entry bookkeeping, every international transaction should create one debit and one credit. In theory, all inflows and outflows should perfectly offset each other. But in real life, data collection is imperfect. So the errors and omissions account acts as the balancing adjustment. So why are errors and omissions needed? Countries conduct millions of international transactions. Not all transactions are measured accurately, reported correctly, or recorded on time. So as a result, the numbers do not perfectly match. Underreporting of capital account transactions is one major cause of errors. Some international financial flows are difficult to track, hidden, or not fully reported. Examples include money transferred through offshore accounts, undeclared foreign investments, informal financial flows. Because capital moves quickly across borders, some transactions may never appear in official statistics. People may deliberately hide international transactions for illegal or secret purposes. Examples are money laundering, tax evasion, illegal trade, smuggling, hiding assets overseas. These activities create gaps in BOP data. If someone secretly transfers millions of dollars to another country without reporting it, official statistics will not match actual money flows. The discrepancy appears in errors and omissions. Errors in the current account, are mistakes that occur in trade statistics, service reporting, and income calculations. Tracking global trade is difficult. Some exports and imports are reported late, valued incorrectly, or completely missed. A company may misreport shipment values, classify products incorrectly, or fail to record service transactions accurately. So why is the errors and omissions account important? It helps economists make the BOP mathematically balanced, recognize hidden financial flows, identify data quality issues. Large errors and omissions may signal hidden capital flight, financial instability, or illegal activity. If a country suddenly shows a very large negative errors and omissions balance, economists may suspect that money is secretly leaving the country. This slide shows a real example of the U.S. Balance of Payments, or BOP, in 2017. It combines all concepts from earlier slides: the current account, capital account, official reserves, and errors and omissions. The key lesson here is the BOP always balances overall. Here are some details of this slide. The table shows that even though the U.S. had a current account deficit, it was financed by capital inflows from foreign investors. The U.S. imported far more physical goods than it exported. Examples would be electronics, cars, consumer products, and machinery. The service exports are $780.9 billion, and the service imports are $538.1 billion. So the U.S. had a services trade surplus. For investment income, the table shows it had received $926.9 billion and paid $709.9 billion. So the U.S. earned more from overseas investments than it paid to foreign investors. The U.S. had a current account deficit of $466.2 billion. In the capital account section, there were strong in foreign investment inflows. So examples are foreign investors buying U.S. stocks, bonds, businesses, and real estate. Foreigners invested heavily in the United States assets. This reflects confidence in the U.S. economy and attractiveness of U.S. financial markets. For the foreign direct investment, or FDI, the table shows new FDI in the U.S. as $348.7 billion and the US FDI abroad as minus 424.4 billion. This measures factories, subsidiaries, business ownership. So the total capital account surplus is 372.3 billion, meaning that large amounts of investment money flowed into the US. The capital inflows helped finance the US current account deficit. So the table also includes 92.2 billion for errors and omissions. The balances, statistical mismatches, and missing data. Bottom line is that this proves the BOP accounting system balances. Okay, so here is a graph of different US BOP balances over time. The key idea is that there are different ways to measure whether a country has a surplus or deficit. A trade surplus happens when a country exports more than it imports. So if Germany sells more goods overseas than it buys, Germany runs a trade surplus. Trade surpluses may indicate strong manufacturing, competitive exports, and foreign demand for domestic products. A trade deficit occurs when imports exceed exports. The United States often has run large trade deficits because it imports many foreign goods. So why can trade deficits be a concern? Persistent deficits may suggest dependence on foreign products, borrowing from abroad, or loss of manufacturing competitiveness. However, deficits are not always bad. Strong economies can still run deficits if consumers buy heavily and foreign investors continue investing in the country. The official settlements balance measures changes in a country's official reserve assets. It focuses on central bank intervention, foreign exchange reserves, and government settlement activities. This helps economists understand whether governments are intervening heavily in currency markets. So if a country continually uses reserves to support its currency, it may indicate financial stress, exchange rate pressure, or capital flight. This graph shows different US BOP measures over time. Several lines are displayed. A. Merchandise trade balance. This line trends strongly downward. It shows the U.S. goods trade deficit growing over time. The U.S. increasingly imported more physical products than it exported. B. Services trade balance. This line stays positive. So the U.S. consistently runs a services surplus because it exports many financial services, software, entertainment, consulting, and technology services. C. Current account balance. The current account line also trends negative. Why is that? Because the large goods deficit outweighs the services surplus in investment income. D. Goods and services balance. This combines merchandise trade plus services trade. It still remains negative overall for the U.S. E. Official settlements balance. This line stays closer to zero. It shows that official reserve interventions were relatively limited compared to trade imbalances. The important observation from the graph is that the graph shows that after the 1980s and 1990s, the U.S. trade and current account deficits became much larger. Why did deficits increase? Several reasons. Globalization, increased imports, consumer demand, outsourcing production overseas, strong U.S. dollar, global investment flows. Does a deficit mean the economy is weak? Not necessarily. The U.S. can't sustain deficits because foreign investors continue buying U.S. assets, the dollar is a major reserve currency, and global confidence in the U.S. economy remains high. Okay, so now we're at the review section of this chapter. Let's review each question clearly. Number 1, what is the function of the international monetary system? The international monetary system provides the rules and institutions that govern international payments, exchange rates, and financial relationships between countries. The main functions are to promote international trade, stabilize exchange rates, facilitate cross-border investment, and support global economic growth. It creates a framework that allows countries to buy, sell, invest, and exchange currency smoothly. So number 2, why is the gold standard a type of fixed exchange rate system? Under the gold standard, countries fix the value of their currencies to a specific amount of gold. A country might define 1 unit of currency equals 1 gram of gold. Because currencies were tied to gold, exchange rates between currencies became fixed. If both currencies are linked to gold, the relationship becomes stable automatically. The gold standard is a fixed exchange rate system because governments maintain fixed currency values based on gold. Number 3, what was the initial goal of the World Bank? The World Bank was originally created after World War II. Its purpose was helping rebuilding war-damaged European economies. Over time, its mission expanded to helping developing countries grow economically, reducing poverty, and financing infrastructure projects. Examples of projects are roads, schools, power plants, healthcare systems, and water infrastructure. Why was the IFC established by the World Bank? The IFC, or International Finance Corporation, was established to support private sector development in developing countries. The World Bank mainly lent money to governments, but economic growth also depends heavily on private businesses. The IFC helps private companies, entrepreneurs, and investors through loans, investments, and advisory services. The goal is to encourage job creation, private investment, and economic development. Number 5, what are quotas important to IMF members? In the IMF, countries must contribute quotas when joining. Larger quotas mean greater influence, larger access to IMF funding, and more responsibility within the IMF. Large economies like the United States, Japan, and China have larger quotas and therefore more voting power. So why did the Bretton Woods system collapse in 1971? The Bretton Woods system collapsed because the United States could no longer maintain the promise of converting dollars into gold. The main causes are A. Too many US dollars are in the world. The global economy needed more dollars for trade and investment, but the US printed more dollars than it had gold reserves to support. This created the Griffin paradox. Foreign governments and investors began doubting whether the US truly had enough gold to redeem all dollars. This triggered speculative selling of dollars and demands for gold conversion. In 1971, Richard Nixon announced the U.S. would stop exchanging dollars for gold. This effectively ended Bretton Woods. All right, what about the differences between fixed and flexible exchange rate systems? In a fixed exchange rate system, governments maintained a stable currency value. Exchange rates are officially set and defended by central banks. Advantages are stability, predictable trade conditions, and lower currency risk. Disadvantages are expensive to maintain and less flexibility during economic crises. In a floating exchange rate system, currency values are determined by supply and demand in foreign exchange market. Advantages are automatic market adjustment, more monetary policy flexibility. Disadvantages are exchange rate volatility and uncertainty for businesses. List the 4 major BOP accounts and their components. The 4 major BOP accounts are A. Current account, which includes exports and imports of goods, exports and imports of services, investment income, and unilateral transfers. B. Capital account. This includes foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, and short-term and long-term capital flows. C. Official reserves account. This would include gold, convertible currencies, SDRs, and IMF reserve positions. And D, errors and omissions. This is just for missing data, reporting errors, and unrecorded transactions. So what factors cause measurement errors in BOP accounts? Measurement errors occur because international transactions are hard to track perfectly. The main causes are A, underreporting capital flows. Some investments and money transfers are hidden or underreported. Or B, deliberate actions. This would include tax evasion, money laundering, and illegal transactions. C, reporting mistakes. Examples would be incorrect trade values, delayed reporting, and statistical errors. So why is this important? The errors and omissions account exist to keep the BOP mathematically balanced. Identify different types of BOP surpluses and deficits. So a trade surplus occurs when exports are greater than imports. The country sells more abroad than it buys. A trade deficit would occur when imports are greater than exports. The country buys more abroad than it sells. The current account surplus and deficit includes goods, services, investment, income, and transfers. The official settlements balance. This would measure the changes in official reserve assets, central bank intervention, and reserve flows. And now we're at the end of this chapter. Thank you, everyone. I hope you all find this useful. Please be sure to reach out to me if you have any questions. Take care, and I'll see you on the next video. Goodbye for now.